Welcome to the Rocky Mountain AI Interest Group. The following presentation entitled Developing Products with GenAI took place on March 13, 2024 at the Atlas Building on the CU Boulder campus.
Carolyn and David, both from Google, are going to co-present. So let me just introduce the speakers and then we'll start that part of the presentation. Carolyn is Director of AI Services at Google. She leads an organization of AI consultants and engineers, as she mentioned earlier, in the cloud consulting group. And she helps those customers adopt AI in the enterprise. She's held various positions at Google since 2010 when she joined in the as ML engineering manager, AI consultant, fiber learning lab lead, and global training lead. David is a data scientist at Google, specializing in machine learning, deep learning, and software development. He has over 10 years of experience in system architecture, IP core networks, and cloud solutions, and he has a passion for continuous learning and delivering accurate data-driven results to enhance company decisions. Please join me in welcoming Carolyn and David.
All right, thank you. We're going to get our slides set up here and get ready. We've got 3 demos for you tonight, so hopefully that'll be something that's interesting for you. And we're going to focus really on developer efficiency. So there's a lot of different products and solutions that Google offers, but we wanted to start by focusing on that because we know we've got so many people here who code in their work every day. And we're just getting the slides up, so bear with me. No, all good. And again, thanks for joining us tonight. We're going to start out with some intros as well, so you can learn a little bit more about David and I and how we kind of got to Google and what we're doing today. But we'll give you a bit of an overview of some of the options that we have for developer efficiency. And then again, we'll go through 3 demos. We'll talk a little bit more about some other potential uses of GenAI as well, beyond just developer efficiency. And then we'll wrap up for the evening. So I know we've got another great speaker following us that also covers some of the developer and product development life cycle. So I think you've got a nice lineup for tonight. All right. And I think we're in business. All right, so as I mentioned, we're going to start with just some brief intros. You heard a little bit about us, but we'll tell you a little bit more fun information, kind of how we got to where we are in our careers really briefly. And then we'll give you a bit of an overview about some of our solutions and products as it relates to developer efficiency. And then David's going to do 3 demos. You can see listed here: code generation, code summarization, and Gemma on your device. Who knows what Gemma is? Oh, good. Lots of hands. I don't have any prizes today. I'm sorry. Next time, I promise I'll bring some swag. And then we'll go over a few other use cases and have time for Q&A. We'll also pause for questions after each of the demos briefly, just so if there's something that's really interesting to you or something that calls out to you, you can ask questions about that too. All right. So next slide. So again, we already heard a brief intro on us, but I'm Carolyn. And this is David. So I think something that's helpful is to talk a little bit about kind of how we got to our current roles at Google. So I've been at Google for a long time, did not have the intention of doing this job when I started. It didn't exist. So I've always kind of followed what is interesting and what I'm curious about. And so just took opportunities to learn a lot along the way, kind of did a lot of self-taught learning as it related to AI and ML. And then was able to just kind of jump in the hype cycle of ML and AI when it was really ramping up around 2016 and have kind of never looked back. It's been quite a ride. So David, I don't know if you want to share a little bit more about how you got to your current role.
Sure. Is this working? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So first of all, thank you for this opportunity. For me, it's it's really good to be here. I'm super excited. 7 years ago, I just came to here to US, and I was sitting different meetups. I was assisting to multiple of them just because I didn't have anything else to do. My wife was working, and my daughter was in the school. So yeah, so I think that this is a really good opportunity. I'm super happy to be here now presenting. Has been like a part of a really good journey during this last year. I joined Google just the last year, so I'm quite new. But anyways, I have been doing a lot of like startup things, crazy things about AI, ML, and all that kind, all in between. So yeah, just super happy to be here now.
Yeah. And again, I know we mentioned we have some openings. Again, once those are live, we'll make sure we promote them to the group as well. But doing the work that David does. So, we work across different industries. He's working with an online retailer right now and more of a biomedical research company, all doing some cool stuff with GenAI, TPUs, GPUs, all sorts of cool stuff. So if that sounds interesting to you, again, David can tell you more about his experience as well, and we'll have those job postings up once they're live. But hopefully that's helpful in terms of kind of how we got here today and why we're excited to present more to you. So again, we'll start out with a few just overview slides around developer efficiency and GenAI, and then we'll jump into those demos. So again, when it comes to developer efficiency, there's really a lot of opportunity. We've already seen some pretty compelling results when we look at the impact that GenAI can have when it comes to a lot of the tasks and the activities that you might be doing in your day-to-day. So we've actually seen 20 to 45% improvements in productivity. And we also find that based on the adoption that we're seeing, I think within the next 3 years, they're estimating about 70% of all developers will be using GenAI. So again, another great tool in your toolbox. I'm not sure if you will be replaced by some of these AI developers that are being launched, but I see this as a way of really enhancing your productivity and your team's productivity as well. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But you can see some of the common tasks where we think GenAI can really play a role are listed there: code generation, code completion, code documentation, code refactoring, code explanation, and code testing. So again, these are all really core to developer role, a software engineering role, and these are all things that GenAI can really help you do more effectively. You can also see there's also a business impact. So again, if you're not a developer yourself, but maybe you manage developers or you have a company where you've got developers that are working, there's also a big business impact of this as well. So you can see some of the kind of levers within your organization that this can affect. Scale, obviously there's more that you can do: cost, experience, and revenue. So I'm not going to read the slide to you, but again, lots of really interesting ways that GenAI can kind of fuel your business too. And this next slide goes into some more information as well on kind of some of the other outcomes and some of the other ways that we really see GenAI benefiting developers. Obviously, there's risks too, but I think it's also important not to lose sight of some of the positive benefits that we're really trying to bring when it comes to GenAI. So you can see here capabilities. We've talked a lot about that already in terms of how we can help you with things like writing code faster or improving the quality of your documentation. But we also hope that this will help with things like culture, right? Because you'll be able to distribute work maybe more efficiently, more effectively. You'll be able to use your talents to do what you do best. We also hope that it brings users to the focus of what you're doing. Again, hopefully it'll free up more time so you can really understand those user journeys in more depth and how you might be able to integrate that into your development workflow. And again, hopefully if you adopt these tools, you'll have greater job security. Again, I think it's a really great competitive advantage to know how to integrate some of these things into your workflow today. And then beyond that, you can see some of the impacts to software delivery performance as well as organizational performance. And again, ultimately, we hope this will also help your well-being. There's a lot of tedious tasks that I really think GenAI can help with, whether you're a developer or someone who's just churning out some emails in the corporate world. So hopefully this will be ways, again, that you can spend more time on things that are important, that are part of your kind of core capabilities and your core talents. All right. So again, I think this one's kind of repetitive, so I won't go through this one in detail. But one really interesting stat that I like on this slide that I think is important to highlight is teams with faster code reviews have 50% higher software delivery performance. So again, that's just one example of one area where GenAI can really help you to be more efficient, not only as a developer, but also as a team member of developers. So again, these are some of the things that we're hoping we can help make better as we're looking at how you develop and some of the tools and tasks that you do. And then I know a big part of these meetups is also around education. So Google has released some great books over the years and some thought leadership. This is not really GenAI specific, but this is more around software development best practices. So I thought it was worth highlighting some of these. I don't know, has anybody read any of these books? Like the SRE book from O'Reilly, I think is a really good one, if you haven't read that one. So again, just some more food for thought. A lot of these kind of best practices apply in the world of GenAI, but they're not new, right? So we don't want to kind of forget some of those best practices around software delivery. All right. So with that, now we're going to get into the fun stuff. So I'm going to turn it over to David, who's going to take you through 3 demos. These relate to some of those key activities where we think GenAI can really move the needle when it comes to developers. So I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Carolyn. Yep. So here I have like 3 different demos. First, we're going to go over this UI, that this is just a GUI that is interacting directly with the APIs of Google for code generation. LLM. So here I have some kind of preloaded some of the examples. So I'm going to click here. So for example, here we are saying, write an API endpoint to fetch the record from BigQuery or the given customer ID received in the request from the client side, and then return the response in a JSON format. So then we're going to just click here. This is connecting to the Google APIs that are exposing the LLM for code generation. And here we can see like a pretty detailed, I would say, endpoint where we are receiving like the customer ID, and based on the customer IDs doing a query on BigQuery. And based on that, also this is being exposed in this endpoint here. So these are like, of course, like some of the capabilities, but also we can say another of the capabilities that are also available is like to how we can like have some kind of explanation about the code. So I'm going to just copy here, and I'm going to go to this code explanation, paste here, and then I can get some kind of like explanation in detail about the code, and also check if there is like some kind of errors. So first of all, yeah, the explanation here, like a few explanation that is exactly says something pretty similar to what we were requesting. And then there is like a detailed step-by-step, like what is doing every part of this particular code. And at the end, there is like errors and unknowns. So in this case, it's talking a lot about the, if the customer ID is not provided, the request query parameter API will return an error, or we are not handling very good like the valid state abbreviation and insufficient permission, for example, if the BigQuery client does not have necessary permission to access the specified table. So there is a lot of error handling that is not happening in this code. And this is like a good way also to try to address the different kind of stuff that you can see in your code. So of course, I here have another example here. For example, I just click there and I populate this. This is like the classical Dijkstra algorithm to get the shortest path on a road. So again, I'm gonna ask to explain how this is working. And let's say the code implement Dijkstra algorithm to find the shortest path. And also something that we can see here is that like the input to this, for example, to this function is a matrix of 6 by 6. And then when we go here to the errors or unknowns and stuff, we can see here that the code assumes that the graph is a 6 by 6 matrix. If the graph has a different size, that code will need to be modified. So it provides you some insight about the code that we are providing. So this is the first part of the demos. And now I want to jump into something a little bit more interesting, because of course you are not going to be developing and asking in another interface. So here I have like a typical Visual Studio code. And we have also implemented Duet AI, that is like a plugin that can be attached to the Visual Studio Code, where you can also do all of these interactions while you are coding. And so when we are like on a team of different software engineers, something that we usually see a lot of course there are like different qualities of the code, and sometimes we find something like this one. Of course, this was not written by any of you here, But so we get a function that is say get something. Okay, so what it is, there is not so much clue about what this thing is doing, right? So I want to just try to get an idea of what this thing can be doing. So I'm going to click here and say, okay, can you explain me about this code? And after some seconds, if the internet allow me, we should see, yeah. Yeah, so here, say the code snippet you provide is a function that calculates the intersection over union. Any of here is familiar with the IOU? It's it's a typical measurement of how two bounding boxes are overlapped. So when you are evaluating, for example, object detection models, you need to know like how good your prediction of your bounding box is between the ground truth and what your model is predicting. So here, even when this function doesn't have like a really good comments, right, or a good name, anyways, this is getting in some way what is doing it, right? So of course, and you're in your team, okay, somebody create this function. Now we know what this thing is doing, and we can say, okay, but what about if we create some kind of like, of course, there is no test cases. So let's try to generate some unit tests. And again, here, we should see that the test cases can be generated automatically for you. And something interesting here is also is like, it just not is looking into the inputs and outputs, it's really providing test cases that make sense. So for example, in this case, when you have bounding boxes, there are edge cases. When one bounding box is here and the other here, the intersection is 0. So that's like the first test case, no overlap. And then it's doing when there is like complete overlap, the two bounding boxes are perfect. So it's expecting a value of 1. So that's good. And also, there is also this test case where there is not a full overlap, so it's a partial overlap, and also it's trying to figure it out what is the overlap. So this can be something like super powerful because there have been like different trends of people that say, oh yeah, you should first write your unit test and then code, but I don't do that. I don't know who to do that, but usually it's the other direction. You just write some code and then, okay, I need to write the test case. And at some day of the week in the sprint, you just start working on your unit test. So this can make you like and of course, this is not perfect at all. So it's not perfect at all. So here, maybe everything looks perfect, but the partial overlap between one and the others, and one in this case is not 0.25, should be like 0.1, 2, 4, whatever other number. But it gives you like a good base and a good starting point. And I realized that it was not perfectly good, but then you can also start here asking, hey, I think that the overlap case is not correct. And you can start interacting and get into also to get a good result. So this is like the first 2 demos, and I have like the bonus track that is the Gemma part. So we can now open to questions.
Pause for some questions. And we did show you kind of like a custom UI that was built using Google Cloud Vertex. So and then this is a little bit more of the consumer version.
Yeah.
But most of the work we do use is the cloud version. But I'm going to walk around and get questions with this mic so we can hear on the recording. Yes.
Hi. Thank you for the demo. It's really interesting. I've used some of the code generating GPTs before, and I do at work actually a different brand. And what I found is tends to be sometimes some lack of contextual awareness or situational awareness with the GPTs. So for example, if you're working and developing a class and you've defined the class variables already and have some methods already defined, if you try and feed it text to say, please generate a method using class variables or so forth, it sometimes doesn't have the awareness to actually use the correct variables that are already defined in the code or from methods that are imported from other API libraries and so forth. Does this work on tackling that challenge at all?
Yeah, so the typical problem about that is it is because of the context window that the LLM model have. So at the beginning, the first version have like a limited content. I don't know about the ChatGPT, but probably was 16K tokens or something like that. And that thing has been expanding. In our case, also we have for the code generation, the current one that we have, like APIs that we have available, the maximum that you can put there is like 32,000 tokens of context. So that make you 32,000 tokens can be like thousands of lines of code. So it is supposed that now you're going to be able to provide like more context and make these things work better. But there is also a caveat. Also, when you are using like when you are typing and you are getting like suggestion about coding, that also sometimes is different because that usually, given that you need like a better response time, they use like a smaller version of the model. That even the number of parameters of that model is just a smaller model, because it's just because of something that is about the delay or the response time that you need. You don't want to be waiting 5 seconds to get like a suggestion.
Right.
So that's why sometimes when you are typing and those kind of things, probably is using a lower version of the model. But when you are like asking directly to the API with all the context, you can get better like context and better answers.
Right. So maybe just one quick follow-up question. I'm sure other people have questions as well, but do you feel like in terms of like where the next advancement will be on this is that it has more token access and the ability to actually see more contextually in place, or do you feel like it's going to require kind of a different architecture to move it to the next level for code generation? The reason I say that is, for example, if you do have a large complex method you want to code, at some point you feel like you're describing the method so much in detail to try and get to generate that by the time you're done, you should have just written it yourself, right? So the benefit is gone, right?
Yeah. No, yeah, and you're right. I think that the efforts that everybody is like trying to do is first to try to, because there is some kind of race about who build like the biggest model, right? Who have like the biggest number of parameters and put that to the people. But something that we have realized during the last time is like you don't need the biggest model for all the tasks. So what we are trying to provide is different sizes of model, different flavors that you can adapt to your different kind of tasks that you are doing. Because sometimes some of the advantages that you have today with the LLM, that you can create LLM to do a classification of whatever, you can put a good prompt and you can have a classifier, and you can build a classifier without any kind of data, because it just have inheritance. It have the knowledge by itself, right? So for some applications, a big model, yeah, can be super, super, super good, but some applications that just need something that is not so big. And that's it. That the good thing is about to have the right size for the right device, for the right environment, and the product that you're trying to build.
Yeah, and just to build off of that too, so there's always trade-offs, right? If you're using a large model, as he mentioned, sometimes the performance and the response time might be longer if you're using a large model. So, and this is something, again, if you dig into the Google Cloud options, there's a lot more opportunities to select different model types and different model sizes and to customize. So a lot of the consumer products don't let you do that. If you want to kind of fiddle around under the hood a bit more. I think what's nice about the cloud options is it gives you a pretty wide selection, and we host first-party but also third-party models too. So you'll find a lot of different options. And again, I think you can play around with them, make sure you're finding the right model for the job. Let's take at least one more question before we jump into our next demo. So
can I get an extension for Cloud Code today in Visual Studio in VS Code?
David?
Yeah, you can have the extensions, but this need to be matched, or you need to log into your GCP account in order to make it, in order to enable it. Yeah, but the extension is available. It is the name of the, you install the Cloud Code extension, and then you need to log in with your GCP credentials for the cloud, because this is using your project. Yeah.
And what's your context window? Is it one file or is it everything you have open?
You can be handling the context window, for example, by highlighting something. But if you can just type here a question, and then the context window is all the stuff that you have open. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So I think on the recording, you might not have heard all the questions, but we were just getting a question about this extension and how to get access. So as well as the context window. So in the interest of time, we're going to do this last demo and then offer some time for a few questions as well. Again, there's obviously a lot we could cover. So, definitely feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn as well, and we can do some follow-up, but hopefully this, gets the wheels turning. I know all of you are very smart folks, probably see a lot of opportunities to apply this in your job. But I want to make sure we have time for this Gemma demo because this is one of our newer releases. So David, over to you.
Yeah, so the Gemma is one of our new releases. I think that was just 1 or 2 weeks ago. And when we released like this open source LLM that you can use. And we released this in 2 different sizes, a 7 billion parameters model and a 2 billion parameters model. So again, someone that can be used in different kind of devices. So what I want to show here is that you can run this model, even the 7 billion parameters model in your, this is laptop. This doesn't require any connectivity. There is not internet. Everything is happening here locally in your laptop. And the way that we can run this 7 billion parameters model, or in this case, using the GPU of the MacBook, is by doing a quantization of the model, so lowering the precision to, in this case, to 4 bits. So, and so then I want to run here first. I need to, and make sure that I have access. MPS is the GPU of the MacBook here, so I have access to this. Of course, when you run this the first time, it needs to download the model from internet, but you can, of course, have that model for you, and you don't need to download it anymore. So then here is I'm loading for this particular case a 7 billion parameters, the Gemma version, and the quantized version of this model, and that was quantized specifically for this GPU of this MacBook. You can do the same for other kind of NVIDIA GPUs, and so there are like quantized version also in Hugging Face. So after we load the model, again, we can ask similar question, just to follow in the topic about generating software. I'm writing here, and this is all happening just locally. So it's creating, in this case, it's creating a polygon class with methods that can get the area, the perimeter, and also drawing the polygon. So you can see here that is creating. You can also specify like how much the maximum amount of tokens and the temperature of the model, to how creative do you want that the answer of the model is going to be. So here in this case, you can see that it's providing that information. And again, this is just all running locally. But of course, the context of this model, before in the previous models that we were interacting, there were models that were trained specifically for coding. But in this case, this is a more like general LLM model. So it can be used for multiple tasks. For example, here for coding, but here, for example, we can just change the question. Let's say that I'm gonna do a travel to London for 3 days, and try to give me some kind of itinerary. And please consider that I'm a fan of football, of course. And by football, I mean the real football. Let's see. So here, day 1 morning, visit the Tower of London, Tower Bridge. And I think that it knows, because here's a catch-up Premier League match at the iconic Wembley Stadium. So that's really, really, really cool. So yeah, again, and this is something more also for, I think that is super useful for a student, or when you're doing research, or when you don't want to spend money hitting APIs to get this thing, because you can just run this in your machine and you are not paying anything. And you can do all your experiment here with this size of models. And later, if you decide that the performance is not going so good and you want to move forward, then you can move to some kind of pay mode, right? But this is like something that I think It's going to help a lot. And this GenAl model in their version also is superior to the other competitors' models by many tests. So yeah, I think that this is the kind of thing that I like because, yeah, I remember when I was studying, in the past, you don't have the money to spend in stuff, and then you can do this in your laptop. So I think this is super powerful.
Yeah, who thought the cloud people would teach you how to run the models outside of the cloud? But we have a lot of flexibility in the options we offer. So hope that was helpful. Again, we showed you kind of like a custom UI created through cloud, also the Duet version, which is more consumer facing, and then even this open source local option, which I think is pretty cool. So lots of options for developer efficiency. I know we've got about 2 minutes left, so I think we can take just a few more quick questions on the demos. And again, we're happy to talk to you more. I'm just going to bring up one last slide as well. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit because I know not everyone here is in an area where they're coding all the time. So we did a deep dive into developer productivity today, but you can see across an organization and these different functions, there's a lot of different ways you can apply GenAI. So again, take a look at the slide. We did focus primarily on developer productivity, but you can see a lot of the other areas where we see a lot of promise is marketing, digital commerce, customer service, as well as streamlining those internal processes. So I think we've got time for 1 or 2 questions. I know there's also usually time for questions at the end, but with the impending weather, we may not want to stick around too long. But does anyone have another quick question? And again, we're happy to connect and keep talking. So first hand I saw was over here. Let me come over to you with the mic.
So I'm going to address the elephant in the room. There's been rumors, not what I'm thinking, but there's been rumors that ChatGPT will replace Google. And not that I think that, but other people have said that. And just wanted to see what your answer would be for that.
Yeah, so I can offer an opinion. I wish I could give you a better answer. I'm not usually very good at predicting the future, so I'll just say that first of all. But, I think ChatGPT is really powerful. It's been amazing to see how much adoption it's had worldwide with consumers. If it will replace Google, Google does a lot of things. So if you're talking about search, I think a lot of people are using it for some things that they used to search for. But I think there are still differences and reasons why some people might prefer a search interface versus ChatGPT in its current format. So I think over time, we'll just see better integration of ChatGPT-like technology into search options. So I don't know if it will replace Google. I think it's exciting because I think it's driving a lot of technological advancements. But yeah, I'm not sure. We'll see. Only time will tell. I actually don't really work on search. I've never worked on search, so I'm probably not the best person to answer that question. But yeah, I think it's definitely been amazing to see how quickly the world has adopted it. Your thoughts, David?
Yeah, so that's I think it's a really good question. And like in general, like what we are seeing, okay, first of all, I will say like the technology that everybody is using today to do LLMs is transformers. And the transformers were created by Google engineers. So that's the first thing. Okay. And the other thing, yeah, Google is some kind of elephant, right? So we were moving probably too slow. And this is just my personal opinion. And probably we were moving too slow in some aspects. And when new companies like OpenAI or whatever companies came with this like great idea, or they are trying to put these technologies to the public in a faster way, this is also making us to change. And I think that's something good. And so it's going to depend on how we can react to that. And that's what we're trying to do. We have been, maybe now everybody can see that Google has been a little reactive in some aspect, but also we're trying to do the thing in a good way, like following our principles and all that kind of stuff. So I think that, yeah, we don't know what's going to happen, but I think that we're in a pretty good spot to fight. Yeah.
Good question. All right. Are we out of time? Yeah. Okay. We're going to move on to the next presenter, but again, happy to stay connected and talk more. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Carolyn. I'm going to introduce our next speaker. David, I'll ask you to hand off the lav mic to Ian, and then we'll get Ian's laptop connected. So Ian Cairns is CEO and co-founder at Freeplay, and he's going to present a talk called Intro to LLMs for Builders, Challenges and Opportunities of Using GenAI in Your Products. Ian is, Freeplay is an AI infrastructure startup based in Boulder. They build experimentation, testing, and monitoring tools that help product development teams make use of generative AI in their products. He spent most of his career in product management for developer products, including as a PM at the Boulder startup GNIP and as head of product for the Twitter developer program. He's also a University of Colorado graduate. Please join me in welcoming Ian Cairns.
What about, oh, look at that. Fancy. Cool. Of course, my mouse is like gone away. I don't quite know what's going on here. I'm gonna try one thing real quick. Someday we will all learn to use Zoom efficiently. But until that time, I'm just making sure that I can switch between screens. I'm like trying to make sure I'm using the right mode for doing that. Yeah, I did that. So that's working. Okay. Come on. All right, well, we're just going to wing this. And, you know, I won't do anything that embarrassing, I hope. But, you know, always dangerous to do a live demo. Cool. Thank you, Grace. Resume share. You really know you're living on the edge when you just present your whole screen. Cool. All right, so hi, I'm Ian. Dan introduced me. I don't have a lot else to say, other than just it's cool to be here. I have known what Dan and crew are doing. We actually see Dan a lot and a bunch of you too. We run an AI builders meetup in Boulder that is kind of like the good close cousin of this. And we've loved getting to support the Boulder tech scene. It's been a lot of fun what's happening in Boulder in the last year. It just feels like there's this new life in the tech community. So cool to meet all of you that I haven't yet. Like Dan said, I've been doing developer products for a long time, been around Boulder since 2006 doing tech companies. So it's fun to see this new era. And we bought pizza tonight. So it's like cool to support you all. So yeah, I mean, agenda wise, like we had this side thread. You're actually going to see it in a minute as part of the demo. But we were just talking about like this group's a real mix of people. I think a lot of hands went up when people were talking about who's an engineer in the room or who's building a product. So maybe for like those of you in the room in that category, you're going to be like, oh, wow, this could have been more technical. And I bet there's people in the room that were like, that last thing was way more technical, and this is like mediumly technical. So we'll see if we hit a good note. But you know, like Dan said, like wanted to talk about just like this intro to building with LLMs in a product and what it looks like to build a good product experience. And for people that are in this space, building software, thinking about getting into this space, because I think maybe when the question was asked if who's like building today, not as many hands went up. Maybe what might you run into? And if you're not building software, maybe it's just interesting and you're curious, but this is the stuff you're going to be using soon. So I wanted to just start with like a question and would love like anybody, 2 or 3 people that are willing, who's used software product that you like use on a daily basis otherwise? So like not Gemma running locally on your laptop, but like, you know, something you just like logged into an app that you normally use and there's been a great AI experience that you thought was really cool. And will you tell us what it was and like, yeah, what made it great?
We use Gong for
recorded calls.
Yes.
And replaying them and they're using AI to summarize calls, to interpret sentiment, and to interpret intent to buy and willingness and objections. It's something that used to take us quite a while to do.
Yeah, and there's a recording happening. So like, what was your name? Holly. Holly mentioned Gong, which is like been around for a while, doing cool AI stuff before transformers were cool. And like now that I think they probably are using transformers and doing better call summarization and helping like detect intent out of it. Who else has a good one? I saw your hand up in the back. Oh, sorry, Dan. I threw this on you. I didn't tell you I was going to ask people to say things.
No worries.
So I actually just saw this right before I came here. My wife runs a short-term property management company.
Yeah.
And she was just showing me on VRBO that it now automates property descriptions, which I hadn't seen before.
Yeah.
So that was pretty cool. Like,
was she listing a property?
Yeah, she was just.
Yeah. So she was like,
she was just starting to list a property and just put in some descriptive words, and it just automated it. And she edited, of course, because it's just kind of, it seemed pretty wonky, like the description it provided, but I thought that was pretty.
That's cool. Yeah. Zillow does something a lot like that too. People have seen Zillow. There's like one more over here somewhere. Somebody had a good one, or else they've given up.
Someone else? Ryan?
Ryan.
Raycast doing really cool stuff.
Yeah. Tell us what raycast is. People don't know.
Raycast is a spotlight replacement if you use a Mac. So, or like when you pull down on Siri and you gives you quick actions, you can think about it that way. So anytime you hit Command Space, it just makes a good guess at what you might want to do. And it just makes, whether it's deep links into Spotify to be like, you probably want to change your song right now, or queuing up confetti to after a build is done, or like it just chaining a ton of workflow things together and getting me to do a lot more deep links into apps and getting apps to play together that weren't done more. They're doing integrations with ChatGPT, and they're also doing some just good, I think, classical suggestion work. So it's a nice mixture there. You don't have to pay, but if you do, it's good.
That's awesome. All right. So like those are good examples. Those are the kinds of things that I want to talk a little bit more about here. This is my like what happens next when I demo my full screen. We'll see. But I wanted to show you all some stuff that we have been impressed by, because we get this question a lot. People are like, what's good out there? So first one I'm going to show you is Loom. There's a video I shared with myself in Slack, testing and evaluating RAG systems with Freeplay, demonstrate how to build evaluations with prompts in Freeplay, and I'm using the Arc browser, which you're going to get a double demo. All right. I was showing you my Slack. I'm like, I don't know what else is in there, but Loom. Slack. This is how people get Loom. If you don't know what Loom is, it's a way to record a quick video and share with people. So whole new way to communicate. Look at this nice title here for me and this description. That's going to matter in a second when I open Arc, which also has like some bonus cool AI features for us. But what's going on here? Like the Loom team basically have this problem, which is they've got a really cool format for sharing short videos and doing screen recordings. And like most of us don't like to record ourselves talking, much less on video. So it's like a big barrier to entry. You've got to get over the fear of recording. People don't like editing stuff. That takes too long. And so the Loom AI team, I think, have done some of the like smartest integration with LLMs just inside of their normal product of anything that I've seen so far. It's hard because this one's already been recorded. But like, first of all, this title was generated by AI right after the recording ended by taking the transcript through. And that sounds really simple, except it was their biggest growth driver in the history of the company for any single feature ship. And like, why was that? The titles of these videos used to all be generic timestamps and nobody knew what they were. And when they all get shared in Slack and you see some random video you don't know what it's about, then why would you open it? So just like doing that one little thing alone drove big growth for the company. There's also this thing in the sidebar where like I can respond to Jeremy. I don't really know what I think about giving like fake authentic feedback. to somebody, but I can do that. And then down here, you see like the summary and where did the title come from? I can read about what this video is about. There are chapters. All this came out of just like reading the transcript using normal transcript technology and then summarizing it. And then as an editor, right? So, I use this a lot. I record videos, send them to my team. If I go to my library, here's one that I can edit. There's a couple other like bonus features. So I just recorded this. The title's already made, but I get some other stuff in the sidebar here. So, this is a message I can share with my team. It's written it for me, so I can just copy the link and go back to Slack, and here's the Loom about new features in Freeplay. It lets me know that some chapters were added. It lets me know that 24 filler words were removed and a second of silence was taken out, which is like an amazing feature if you use Loom on a regular basis. I don't know how many times I've said or like in this conversation already, but at least 24 times in 3 minutes the last time that I recorded something. And then you just kind of get a good feel for like this stuff's happening and it's generated by Loom AI. So if you're building products, like I think this is a good one to look at as an example of just like little simple things that you can do to make the experience better for a customer. And it's not like it just generated the whole video in an avatar for you and looks magical and like AI. It's just a better user experience. One other thing that I was going to show people, and then we can move on. Superhuman. Does anybody use Superhuman for email? 1, 2. Yeah, so Superhuman is a little ridiculous because it's $30 a month for email. And if you have a business where you can justify expensing that, it's like, I think, highly worth it. I've never been addicted to an email app before, but here's a good example, right? So like, what have they done with AI? There's this whole summarization thread at the top. You saw how much scrolling I was just doing, just trying to look for the one example I wanted to show you. But here I can see like, hey, what's going on back and forth here? Big thanks to Grace and Dan for coordinating us all. And then, this feature I wanted to show you here, if I go to reply, come on. All right. I screwed it up because I started going back and forth with Grace and Dan after this started. All right. Problem with live demos. So what I wanted you to see is a bunch of little snippets down here. And this is a good opportunity for me to toggle back because I had to like just pull the ripcord option in case the internet didn't work, and they're in my slides. So what did this look like before? These are slides. So you see at the bottom, it says like, Zoom should work for David. That's for Carolyn, from Carolyn. And then it says great news or need more details or understood, we'll prepare. These are things that I could have clicked and instantly sent a response, except it would have said, hey, Dan, thanks for the info. And that's just wrong, right? So this is also a good example of like how things fail. One last example, and then move on to the rest of the slides. They also give me a good feedback opportunity here. So there's this like little thumbs down icon that I clicked. They've given me some categories. They're kind of all over the place, but one of them was replied to the wrong person. So you can tell these categories are actually coming from the problems that they see on a regular basis. And then I can actually like tell them what I should have done to make this better. Pros and cons here, but like I love that they do this. And then I also think anybody building in this space, we'll talk about this in a minute, you're going to want to build a feedback loop like this because stuff will go wrong. And that's one of the key differences of like building in this space. So, what I think was cool about this, like simpler, easy workflows for people, just like normal flow of doing email or using Loom, a little bit of delight that made it more fun for people. The viral promotion part, if you don't know this, like we pay $5 a month extra. That's 33% extra for Loom AI, and then pay for that for my whole team, and it feels totally worth it. If you're building a business, like there's a good upsell opportunity here. You want to promote it. There's definitely some poor quality answers, and that happens, and that's part of life. Like this is different from traditional software where you build it, test it, ship it, and it just keeps doing that thing again until you stop, until you change something. And the feedback loop's important. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about like, what do they do to build these products? Like, what are they doing today? Teams like them. If we're thinking about like what's different building software with LLMs than like before. unless you're an ML engineer and you've been working in this space for a while. But like everybody else that's been building web apps and mobile apps and distributed systems for a long time. One is that like your data really matters. So, we just looked at the feedback loop. Like you need to know what an LLM is producing, what it's sending to your customer. You need to be able to keep track of that in some kind of structured way that lets you actually build a learning loop and improve with it. And this is really different from if you think about like most applications prior to now, where you need to capture some data. If people are engineers and you're using Datadog, or if you're working in the web world and use, Google Analytics, it's like good signal about how your application's doing, but it's not like a core part of making your application work in the future. Mark's here. Like if you want to be able to capture data and then do fine tuning later, like you need to keep tabs on all this data that's being generated. Another thing in this space that's, I think, confounding to people when they're getting started, we talked about a bunch of different models. Google's amazing. There's this other company that builds a thing, bunch of open source stuff out there, right? Like you could just turn knobs for days. I think this is the next part of this, where people kind of pull their hair out between prompt engineering, different models, different configuration for those models. If you're doing anything, like some people in the room be like, what? Like RAG systems, where you're retrieving data from another database and trying to pull it into a large language model. That has a bunch of configuration around it that you need to optimize. And I think one of the things we see in this space is people just get really frustrated and eventually just kind of give up and they decide it's time to ship it and they move on, or they don't ship. And we're lucky to work with a lot of people that already have shipped. But I think that's a part of this world to just be prepared for and think about how to address it. And related to that, like you need to actually really think about and define what good means. And if we look back at like the Loom summary or the email generation where I was like saying something wrong to Dan, and the categorization of like the problems that were happening there, if you're building traditional software, process has kind of been the same for 15 years. Like somebody writes a product spec and produces some mock-ups and engineers build it and somebody tests it. And like I said before, if it works and you ship it, it probably won't break unless you do something wrong. Whether something works or not in this space is very multidimensional a lot of times. And we talk to a lot of teams where we say like, well, how are you going to decide if it's a good quality output at the end? How do you know, Superhuman, if that email is good? And they say, well, it's kind of read them all, right? And like that works when you're getting started, but you've got a problem at some point once you have, like they do millions of these flowing through the system. It's almost like you need a social scientist mindset. I'm sure there are people here who do this kind of work. People who design great surveys learn to ask really good questions and be really specific about what they're asking. Is it addressing the right person? Is it a good tone? Is it a good format? Like these all become dimensions to evaluate. Related to that, you're never done. So models change, even if their owners say that they shouldn't. Like I think we see that like publicly hosted models change behavior in some cases. Maybe you go deep into it, about the seed parameter for OpenAI or things like that, you can control it a little bit better, but like things can change in unexpected ways. Certainly if you're building your own data pipelines, things can change. You need to keep an eye on what your systems are doing. New models come out. You learn new things from your customers. So there is this like need for a learning loop that is much different from traditional software. Again, like you're not opting to optimize something because there's a business opportunity. Sometimes you're forced to with LLMs because stuff just keeps changing. And then the thing that we have found, if you're working in a company environment, whether it's like a startup or a big company, this is no longer just the domain of software engineers building software. And we see not just product managers and designers and QA people wanting to get involved in prompt engineering and data QA. We also see like just people from all over the company who, I see customer support people who are saying, I see an opportunity to fix that weird thing that it did with Dan and Superhuman. Like, give me the chance to do that. It's just English, right? Like, can I write a prompt that'll actually fix that problem? And we see that happening a lot. It's been really interesting. Like, it's every paradigm shift in, technology, like roles and responsibilities change. And like, this is really happening again, and a sign of how big it is that like roles are changing. So what do you do about it if you're building? I'm not here to hawk Freeplay. but this is what we're doing about it. And I think some of the things we're doing help, right? So we've built this platform that is designed for software development teams, including the PMs and the designers and the QA people, to use together with engineers to ship better products. And I'll walk through kind of like, how have we thought about this? Whether you use a tool like ours or, do it yourself, what are you doing here? So I talked about like, hey, your data really matters. What do you need to do about that? Like capturing the inputs and outputs that you send to a large language model and being able to make use of those becomes really valuable. And we see people doing this not just in production, but from early development days through staging and being able to really get a sense of like, what's my code doing? What's the model doing? Like knowing what's happening and being able to capture that as an asset so that later you can use it for not just QA, but for testing, for fine tuning, other reasons. So this is one big part. You want to know like what's going on in your system. You especially want to know what's going on in production. And I think this is the thing we see with a lot of ML teams. There's a long history of like building eval data sets and, looking at the same couple hundred or couple thousand examples for a model and just testing them over and over again. But if you're stuck on a couple hundred or a couple thousand examples and you're running a million of something through your system, like who knows what's happening with your customers, especially if you're building a chatbot or something and they can just say anything to it. So being able to keep an eye on production is important. Another thing, like I mentioned, you could just turn knobs for days. What we have found here, if there's anybody in the room who's done this, like it'd be fun to raise your hand, but so many people come to us and they say, yeah, I keep track of prompt and model versions and all the different knobs that I'm turning in a Google spreadsheet where I've got like, a row for every different configuration. And then I have a column for every different test case. And I just kind of copy and paste stuff into the OpenAI playground and see what I like better at the end. So we've built a system to help with this where basically if you're familiar with feature flagging or like server-side experimentation platforms, we let people push prompt and model changes from the server to your code. You can use an environment variable and call like a different version of a prompt or model and do that with an SDK where no changes are needed in the code. So a product manager wants to change something, they don't need to ask a software engineer to update a string and do a deploy. Like it can just happen. So that's been a big part of helping out there. And then we log from that last screen all the data related to those versions so people can really like measure and track change over time. The next part, like defining what good means. There's this phrase I mentioned before, evals in this space or evaluations. Basically think about like, how do you look at the behavior and performance of a model and decide if it's good or not? In this space, people call that an evaluation. One of the things that's been interesting, folks have worked in traditional NLP or ML for a long time. There's a bunch of like common practices there that just aren't working in the same way with LLMs. Getting like really nerdy, like a rouge score or like a blue score, these things that are about semantic similarity sometimes just don't matter at all when a model is producing a valid sentence for a human, and there could be a totally different phrasing of that sentence for a human. And like the similarity of how much the words overlap just doesn't matter. So what we see a lot of folks doing, there are some metrics like that that look at semantic similarity, Levenshtein distance, those help. You still need to curate a ground truth and be able to compare to something. We see a lot of folks just using LLMs. And this is what we're showing on the screen where people can use Freeplay to configure basically prompts that study prompts in order to develop metrics around what's happening and can ask very custom questions like, is this response happening in my brand voice? Or like, was this interesting on some criteria that matter to them? So being able to just like figure out what are the criteria that matter, run those on a regular basis, including on production data, that's very important. To the you're never done part, like this builds on the last one. We talked about this a little bit. You need to be able to build a feedback loop. And this is unfamiliar, I think, to a lot of product teams that have been operating in traditional software. There's like a little feedback button in the corner of a lot of apps, and maybe somebody on the support team reads what gets submitted. Building like a pipeline that actually leads to product improvement is a very different thing. And like you saw a little bit of what Superhuman was doing as an example. we log all that data back into Freeplay. We use it as part of measuring test results. How many people identify issues so they can improve. And then that also leads into being able to automate testing. So I mentioned before, like one of the practices in this space is to curate example data sets, both representative good examples, edge cases, maybe failure scenarios. We let people curate those kinds of data sets on Freeplay. So they can see something that happened in production, save it for later. They can write their own, whatever they want to do, but then be able to play those back anytime that they version their code or change their model or change their prompt, and be able to score instantly with these kinds of eval criteria and see how did the old version do versus the new version. And that's a lot of how people decide whether to ship. It's very rare. I haven't met anybody yet who only decides to deploy software with an LLM when it's perfect. Generally, it's just is it better? And are the failures not terrible? Some criteria like that. And then the last part to getting the whole team involved, whether you use our tool or something else, I don't know, I capitalized the P, just not editing my slides carefully enough, but we've really focused on trying to build a workflow that gives developers full flexibility. We have a very lightweight SDK, we think. If you put us on a spectrum, there are frameworks like LangChain that are very opinionated and try to control business logic and tell you how to handle working with an LLM. We're on the other side. We're kind of use LangChain or not, do whatever you want. We basically do two things. We give you the right version of a prompt and we let you record what you send to us. And then we do the rest of the work on our server. But then you can get a product manager, a designer, or a QA person in the loop, and building with this integrated system. It's kind of hard to see what's happening here. I should have probably just done a live demo. Maybe you can if people are interested. But what this is showing is a playground like people have seen before, but integrated with this whole test case concept where you can actually load up your saved test cases in the playground, try different models, try different prompt changes, and the whole system just kind of works together and launch batch tests from the UI. So those are some of the things that we're doing to solve these problems. But again, just things to think about solving if you're building in this space. And that's the end of me talking. Looks like we got plenty of time for Q&A from Dan's timer. Glad to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian.